Right, you all can see my screen now, yes? Just gonna take that as a yes. Interrupt me if it's not the case. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Casey McPherson, Senior Planner with DOLA, and today is our sixth monthly engagement meeting for the implementation of our 2024 land use and housing laws. As a reminder, the laws that we're talking about that the Community Development Office is actively working on implementation of are these listed here: residential occupancy, minimum parking, accessory dwelling units, transit-oriented communities, and affordable housing planning. We do this in partnership across state agencies. You've probably become used to seeing Kelly and Nathan from CEO and CDOT respectively. They are out of town today. So while it is 100% DOLA staff today, we continue to work in partnership across agencies. Another reminder as part of our usual introduction, this is our monthly engagement meeting as part of a number of engagement framework components, including one-on-one meetings and other presentations, web engagement, and so on. We will be referencing our Engage DOLA webpage quite a lot. That's where we post our draft tools, receive comments on those tools, post final tools, and other relevant information. That's also where we keep an updated list of FAQs. So if you are out there reviewing this recording later on, you can know that the Q&A section of each of these webinars informs the FAQ section of that web page, and that's where you can make sure to stay up to date on what the latest questions and answers are. Our meeting format for these monthly webinars are first general updates, then transit-oriented communities, TOC, parking, neighborhood centers, and strategic growth planning as a multi-law separate track, housing planning and displacement, and then ADUs. Last month was a recorded webinar since it happened during the holidays. We talked about a number of items, but I'd like to flag for you all that we did more of a deep dive on neighborhood centers. What are they as identified in the legislation, 174 and 1313, and what is going to be coming up on our timeline with those. So if you are curious for more info on neighborhood centers, please do go ahead and review that recording or reach out or check Engage and so on. This month, we're going to be covering same topics with the latest information. So last time we did a bit of a 2024 reflection and what's coming up in 2025. And so now we're going to give you the latest on progress since then. As a reminder on participation guidelines, these meetings are meant to give implementation updates, introduce draft and final tools, and solicit your input. So your questions are critical to a successful implementation. We will post a recording of this meeting and slides on Engage DOLA alongside the prior months. And we're going to continue to update those FAQs like I mentioned just a moment ago. So please do visit Engage DOLA regularly and reach out, of course. Now I'm excited to say that we have some new staff, as we've been mentioning would be happening for a while now. I'd like to give a moment to each of our new staff to say hello. So I'm going to call them out by name. Please come on camera and introduce yourselves, starting with Eugene.
Thank you, Casey. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. It's so nice to meet you all. Very happy to be here. I am the unit manager for technical assistance related to our land use and housing laws. So feel free to reach out at any time with questions. We're here to help, and I'm really excited to be a part of this great team. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Eugene. It's really good for people to see your face and your name, especially because, just so you all know, starting next month, you're going to see a lot more of Eugene as he starts to lead us through in partnership with other staff on these webinars. Okay, Mitch.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm familiar with some of you, but I am now the Planning Grants Unit Manager here with DOLA. I've been with the team for almost 3 years, previously managing the 1271 program and overseeing the Strong Communities Grant Program. And in my new role, I'll be overseeing 3 new grant programs as a result of the last year's legislation. and they'll be developed this year and focused on housing planning, accessory dwelling units, and transit-oriented infrastructure. Nice to see you all, and reach out with any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitch. All right, Mark, you're up.
Morning, everyone. Mark Williams. I've been here for about 6 weeks now, and I'm the lead planner in the technical assistance unit, and I'll be working a lot on the housing assessments. And I see a few names out there, but most of you haven't gotten to meet yet. I worked in the city of Durango for almost 19 years before I came over. So it's an exciting time to be here, and I look forward to meeting you all later.
Thanks, Mark. I should have asked about this before, but Scott, you mentioned Hannah might have been on, and I thought she was going to be out, so I was just going to say a hello from her. But now I'm pausing just in case I'm wrong. Okay, I think then I'll just say we also have a number of other staff, but we're kind of introducing slowly. But Hannah's another one of our technical assistants planners. So I wanted to make sure that you saw her face on the slide, and you can see her maybe in subsequent meetings. We have other staff that you'll get to know in time, but didn't want to sort of open a floodgate of that sort of in this moment. So we'll move on with the rest of our content now. Thanks for saying hello. All right, into the main agenda, and starting with transit-oriented communities. As a reminder, just review of things that were done in 2024. Lots of statutory deadlines and materials created. So we worked on that transit area mapping, the calculation model development, both for housing opportunity goals and transit center modeling. We worked on the guidance and guidance for compliance, and did a lot of especially one-on-one technical assistance. What's happening in 2025? Well, we're going to finalize some of the drafts that we created. It's coming up real quick here, if you can see that deadline. The Housing Opportunity Goal Tool and Transit Center Model are going to be final versions published in February. Also, final compliance guidance will be published in February. Coming up in June will be the preliminary compliance reporting. And so currently we're working on developing what we call a form and manner, because that's what it's called in the legislation. But basically, what is the compliance report going to look like? What information will be needed, and so on. So we've launched that process, and more to come. So we're working hard to get that set up so it'll be there for you in time for the end of June. And then also locally, communities are working on initial work for transit centers. And again, just a little plug, if you have any questions about the analysis that you're working on, whether all of the assumptions are in there and that sort of a thing, please do reach out to set up one-on-one technical assistance meetings. We do find that those are typically the most, when the most clarity kind of comes. Reminders on resources. So we created some information about the TOC law, maps and data for transit-oriented communities, and then also compliance guidance. And finally, there's a CHAFA page for state housing tax credit programs. And then I'll just ask, I see some notices about hands or chats. If staff would interrupt me if necessary, please do. Like kind of the way that I have the slides, I can't see everything at the moment. All right, continuing on, next steps for TOC. By the end of January or early February, we'll be publishing new guidance sections for review and comment. So that's going to be guidance for designating transit centers, for affordability and displacement strategies, and for insufficient water supplies. This is going to be a quick turnaround by mid-February. So please note that we'll do our best. And if anything kind of falls between the cracks of that timeline, we will be accepting comments after that publication date. So we'll just ask that you just continue to engage. If you find something after that deadline, please continue to feel free to reach out. We want to make sure that whatever we're putting out there is the most helpful that it can be. So we'll try to work to be more flexible on that while hitting the deadline. So again, by February 28th, we need to publish the full TOC guidance, we've been trying to put it out there as we've been developing, but the full guidance will be by February 28th, the final housing opportunity goal and transit center technical tools, and publishing draft form and manner, again, compliance reporting templates. So updates and clarifications can be made after that deadline, but we're working to hit that statutory deadline. All right, next up, minimum parking, 1304. So here's a reminder on things that were completed in 2024. We did the transit service area mapping and published compliance guidance. And we did publish the best management practices report by the statutorily required December 31st deadline. Next up will be the parking compliance date for local action, which is June 30th of this year. And so we are working to create the form and manner templates, again, the compliance reporting requirements, but more information on a slide to come. So again, parking reminders, we do have the maps of applicable transit service areas on Engage DOLA, the interactive maps. We have interpretive guidance on there as well. And we're offering those courtesy reviews. So if you're planning to modify code, we are happy to do a preliminary courtesy review to check general alignment with the requirements. So just go ahead and reach on out by email if that is of interest to you. Here's a couple notes on the parking management best practices study report. So we published that, it's on Engage DOLA. It includes implementation guidance, examples, case studies, challenges, as well as a collection of resources. So go ahead and take a look, and huge thank you to all of you who participated and provided input. Big thanks for that. And then we're going to continue to be trying to find additional case studies to promote. So stay tuned. If you have any local case studies that you'd like to share that you think we should be promoting, please reach out and let us know. Very interested in doing that and promoting your local work that has been effective in your context that might be able to be learned from others. Next steps for the parking law. We will be developing the draft reporting forms and guidance by February. So the form and manner, the documents, compliance reporting. That's going to mean two things for the parking law, because there's not a generalized compliance reporting requirement according to that law. So we are creating an optional reporting piece on our compliance portal for those that would choose to report on that. There is, though, that required reporting for any subject jurisdiction who uses that small exemption. There is required reporting for that. So we'll be creating a small form for that as well. All right, over to you, Scott, to take us through the next two sections.
Great, thank you, Casey. So again, I'm Scott Williamson. I'm the land use and water planner working with Casey on the DOLA team. And next slide. So we went over the concept of neighborhood centers in depth in December. So make sure to check out that recorded webinar if you would like more details. Just generally here, neighborhood centers are a voluntary method for local governments statewide to designate areas that state agencies will incentivize via funding opportunities. So we talked about things in December, including the purpose and types of neighborhood centers, noting that there would be a variety across the state. And then also the goals, which include fiscal and environmental sustainability, the goals associated with concentrating growth in neighborhood centers. And then again, the process for criteria development, and this is an important piece. We're seeing the designation of neighborhood centers, or at least the guidance for neighborhood centers, as closely related to the strategic growth report. And one of the reasons we selected the consultant team we did is they're able to look across the variety of different land use and housing laws and make those connections. And then finally, funding sources and a state grant program modifications are to come in the future. So the three-step process here for implementing neighborhood centers. First, we are required to set criteria for neighborhood centers by June 2025. And then local governments will voluntarily identify neighborhood center locations. And then by December 2026, certain state agencies are required to update certain grant award criteria by December 2026 to consider neighborhood center designations. All right, moving over to statewide reports. So the Senate Bill 174 was kind of divided into three major chunks. One chunk that we'll talk about next is related to housing planning. The middle chunk is dedicated to these two statewide reports. And then kind of the third chunk of Senate Bill 174 was comprehensive plan guidance for local governments. So we're talking about that middle chunk here with the two statewide reports. So the statewide strategic growth report, we've launched initial focus groups for that. In the months of February and March, we'll be looking at developing scenarios and defining what inputs go into that. You'll see here I've noted a couple of different plans, statewide plans. You'll notice the Colorado Water Plan, Vision 2035, and a few others. And we're working closely with our consultants to take a close look at what's been developed so far as an input into these plans. And then between April and July, we'll be modeling some scenarios. Our consultants will be working carefully on that, and then looking at different policies as required in the legislation. In August and September, we'll be looking at finalizing the report and creating guidance that will flow from the reports, again, connecting to those local comprehensive plans. And then the Natural Land and Agricultural Opportunities Report, we're really just getting started on that one. We are, again, evaluating what inputs will go into this report. We'll start, Logan Simpson will be leading some introductory webinars over the next couple of months. And then we'll have some planned roundtable discussions in July and August. All of this is very much a draft scope, and we're getting feedback from state agencies and others on kind of the final scope for that report. Both these reports are due in 2025. The statewide strategic growth report is due at the end of October, and the Natural Land and Agricultural Opportunities report is due by the end of December. Next slide. All right, and that first chunk I mentioned around housing planning, happy to give you some updates on that. Again, some of this was covered in the December webinar, but just as a few reminders. Next slide, Casey. We published a self-assessment for local housing needs assessments and a preliminary strategies menu back in August of 2024. Also, we published importantly, we published the housing needs assessment methodologies and the displacement risk assessment guidance. Both of those were informed by some intensive focus group conversations. And then Mark will talk a little bit about the process for reviewing pre-existing local and regional housing needs assessments. And just a note here that all the guidance I just mentioned is currently live on Engage DOLA, and I think we have a link to that in the chat. So now is when I will hand it over. Oh, not yet, sorry, Mark. One more slide. So between January and March, we're going to continue review of the pre-existing housing needs assessments. Those are both local and regional housing needs assessments. We're going to be starting the process to develop guidance for new comprehensive plan requirements. Importantly, this likely will be done in early 2026. It's important to note that some of those requirements for including, for example, a water supply element in comprehensive plans are due by the end of 2026. So we are dealing with some tight timelines, and we'll keep you updated with that as the process moves along. The displacement risk assessment guidance, as I mentioned, we completed that, but we're going to continue to develop additional assessment guidance for more community types and approaches. For example, there might be some nuances related to rural resort communities and mountain resort communities that we might want to pay close attention to. And then a couple other things due by the end of June 30th, the Displacement Risk Mitigation Regional Resources Study. So what regional resources currently exist that can support displacement mitigation efforts, and then the affordability strategies and displacement mitigation strategies. We're going to be seeking input through April of 2025, and then having a final draft in May for in time for June 30th deadline. So now I will turn it over to Mark on the process and what we've learned so far from pre-existing housing needs assessments.
Thanks, Scott. So SB 24174 is the housing needs assessments. It's a pretty sweeping law. 165 different towns, cities, and counties around Colorado are subject to the law. And we've already gotten HNA's housing needs assessments covering 91 different jurisdictions. Most of those are actually in the DRCOG, the Denver Regional Council of Governments regional HNA, which is close to 60, but we've gotten them from around the state, local HNAs, and then an additional 6 regional ones. So those are usually counties. Fraser Valley is an example, but also Chaffee County, we have one from them. So we still have, do the math, more than 70 left to do. And so we've been seeing some patterns in what we've been getting. And I think that has to do with the HNAs that we have received already. They began work on those as early as 2022. The SB 174 wasn't codified until May of 2024. And so there's some things in that law that are unique that maybe when different governments were scoping out their work to how to do these housing needs assessments, they didn't get into the scope, and so they're not in the HNAs. And so those include things like accessible and visitable units, and those have specific definitions from fair housing laws. Also supportive units. Scott mentioned earlier the displacement risk that is now live. So that's one thing that we will need to focus on as well. And then market limitations, that's more of a qualitative assessment. It's not actually required, but it's recommended by the law. So this would be things like, does your zoning ordinance limit how much housing you can do because you have so much in single family, for example, or it could be related to infrastructure, financing, any number of things. So because they're so specific, these criteria, we thought it would be a good idea to have a webinar to explain what these items are that tend to get overlooked or not in the HNAs. We don't have it scheduled yet. It's coming up soon, though. We'll send out a communication to everybody who's here about when we'll do that. And so sometime within the next month, we'll have that, because the counties and cities that haven't done their HNAs are sending out RFPs to bid for consultants. So we want to make sure that we can kind of get ahead of that, so we don't have to go through the process of saying, well, everybody missed this again. So, and I know Scott wanted to talk a little bit about our water supply needs that are in 174, and he's the state's expert on that. So I'll turn it back over to Scott. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. So I just wanted to say a quick note here. Mark called out some missing elements, including the water supply needs of some of the existing housing needs assessments. And I wanted to note that the legislation required DOLA to develop some guidance within specific parameters in collaboration and consultation with Department of Natural Resources. And I just wanted to note that we're not expecting a water supply master plan as part of these housing needs assessments. The calculation that we provide is relatively simple in terms of a gallons per capita per day calculation, but there are opportunities to look at this as just a first step in understanding kind of the magnitude of needs related to existing and new housing needs. And this is a conversation that we hope you'll carry into more of a comprehensive planning process. So don't think that you need to require a big piece on the water supply needs and housing needs assessments. It's just something that we want to have on the radar as required by the legislation. And so I will go ahead and pass it over to Mitch to talk a little bit about the grant program associated with this.
Great, thanks, Scott. And next slide, please. Hi, everybody. So the Sustainable Affordable Housing Assistance Grant Program is being developed in response to Senate Bill 24-174, and we aim to launch the program in Q1 of this year. The program will provide grants to local governments and regional entities to provide statutorily compliant housing needs assessments, housing action plans, and strategic growth elements of comprehensive plans. Some of this work may be completed through multi-jurisdictional partnerships. There's approximately $12 million that has been allocated to this program for grant funding, and we're anticipating that early rounds will prioritize housing needs assessments and action plans due to limited funding. And as you saw on the last slide, the widespread applicability of this law. The draft guidelines are now live for public comment. We're going to put a link in the chat to engage DOLA so that you can take a look at the draft grant program guidelines. There's a comment form linked in there that you can provide your feedback. And while we would like your feedback on the entirety of the document, we really want you to focus on a couple key elements such as program match requirements, scoring criteria, and eligibility. So we're keeping the comment tool open through February 16th. That's a Sunday. So about 3 weeks from now, you've got time to give comments via that tool and or reach out to me via email, which will be shared at the end of this presentation. And just a quick note, I noticed our comment form is linking to a couple old questions about the transit center calculation model. So this should be corrected within the hour, but thank you for your patience and thank you for your feedback in advance. I'll pass it over to Casey to talk about ADUs. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitch. All right, our last main topic, ADUs. I think we were talking before this session about how this might be record setting as far as kind of a quick monthly engagement meeting for at least for the presentation component, and that is proving to be true. So here we go. ADUs, reminder on the timeline. So we have published compliance guidance, and then it got a little quiet on ADUs for a while. And it's still, I'll call it a little quiet, but there's about to be some activity that's notable. So starting in February, we're going to refocus in on the strategy list, the ADU encouraging strategy list, to finalize that. And then that will lead to a larger, more robust ADU toolkit in approximately April. Stay tuned on that. So we'll be working on drafts, again, putting them on Engage, requesting input and finalizing those pieces. The ADU compliance deadline is June of this year. So this will fall into that bucket we've been talking about regarding creating form and manner, or rather compliance report requirements for the forthcoming compliance portal, for lack of a better word. And then also this law came with a grant program that we anticipate launching in the fourth quarter of this year. So that'll give time for the compliance reporting, for review and working with communities, and then launching that grant program. Some reminders, we have our interpretive guidance on Engage DOLA, and much like the parking law, we do offer courtesy reviews. So that's just to check for general alignment with House Bill 24-1152. Please reach out if you're interested in that. Next steps. So we're going to be creating the ADU supportive strategies list. We're going to develop and expand on guidance. It'll become part of this bullet 2, the ADU toolkit. That's going to be more in-depth guidance to help jurisdictions looking to boost ADU production. Again, the form and manner or compliance reporting templates, we're going to work on that so that it will be up and running and clear what needs to be submitted by June 30th, 2025. And then again, developing the funding programming, and we are coordinating with CHAFA, who has financing funding for ADUs. All right, we've made it through. So wrap up and next steps. A few reminders here on some of the key tools with links that we have created to date. Check those out on Engage. and then contact information here for you as well. So now we're going to start our Q&A portion of today. I will stop the recording. For those of you who are listening to a recording of this session, go ahead and check the FAQ section to see anything that was blockbuster that we decided to update that section with. Thank you for your time and attention. Let's move into Q&A. And it's going to take me a second to stop the recording. Oops. Or Scott, maybe that's you as the host.
Yeah, I'll
Why can't I
see if
find
I
this?
can stop recording.
Yes, please. Thank you.